Hey guys, TS here. Now I know what you're all thinking. Wait a minute, Tony. Didn't you say you were done with Pikmin? Yes, I am done. I've covered the entire series up until this point. This is simply a compilation of all the videos I made on said series. So if you ever feel like you want to binge watch those videos and don't feel like shuffling through the channel or playlist, you can just come here. I've edited out the outro screen so that the transitions can feel a bit more natural, but other than that, these are basically the same videos as before. With that said, enjoy the show. Normally I wouldn't like a game to be this in your face about its goal, but considering the kind of game Pikmin is, it's effective at establishing its stakes. The tutorial area also does a good job at setting up Olimar's quest for survival. Everything you need to know about growing and controlling the Pikmin is conveyed to you here as simple as it can be. It even forgoes the time limit, which we'll get into in a bit, so that you can take your time learning how things work. Now that the tutorial is out of the way, I suppose I should mention the elephants in the room. The first one being the graphics. A few people have called them dated, and by today's standards, they definitely are. But by the standards of its time, it doesn't look that bad. Like, the space scenes do look pretty meh, especially when they're upstaged by Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, which released 2 months later. But there are only 2 scenes in the whole game that take place in space. The rest of the game is on the planet, and it doesn't look half bad for an early GameCube game. Maybe it's because I'm playing the Wii version that has slight graphical improvements, but I still think it looks good enough. The other elephant in the room is the time limit. Due to the planet's more dangerous creatures, you can only explore the areas for the ship parts and grow Pikmin from sunrise to sunset, which lasts about 13 to 18 real-time minutes. Many people were, and still are, turned off by this. In fact, I remember someone recommending that I start with Pikmin 2 and 3, since they're more lax than Pikmin 1. Well, to be entirely honest, I don't understand the complaints. It's made very clear why the time limit is there, and it's not like you aren't given enough time to get all the ship parts. You have 30 days to collect 30 ship parts, with 5 of them being optional. So you just need to get 1 ship part per day and you'll be fine. Plus, on certain days, I was able to get 2 parts in one day, which afforded me time to clear away from my Pikmin to carry the parts back to the ship without getting killed. Hell, one of the first parts you get is a radar that tells you the location of every ship part in the area. You have plenty of options to deal with the time limit, and it never feels unfair. As the first game in the series, you only have 3 types of Pikmin to work with: red Pikmin, yellow Pikmin, and blue Pikmin. Reds are the first type you get, and they have their uses through combat and immunity to fire. Yellows are found in the Forest of Hope, and they can use special bomb rocks to take down barriers that can't be brought down by the Pikmin, and also help deal with some of the tougher enemies in the game. They're also lighter and can be thrown to higher areas where some parts are. The blues, found in the Forest Navel, are the only ones that can go in the water, and there is a lot of water in this game. Every Pikmin has a purpose, and no one type is ever overshadowed by another. A nice balance. So Pikmin on the GameCube had a serviceable yet inconvenient control scheme. You could only throw Pikmin a set distance from Olimar in whatever direction he was facing. You couldn't lock onto anything, nor could you aim the reticle independently from movement. You would think you could, given that the GameCube controller had a second stick, but asking Nintendo to remember the stick is like asking Atlas to remember Persona 1 and 2. They can't. The Wii version, meanwhile, uses pointer controls to aim and throw Pikmin, and it feels so natural. People like to clown on and even chastise motion controls nowadays, but this is an example of motion controls done well. You can even hear certain sound effects through the Wii remote, which is a cute detail. The little diary entries Olimar writes at the end of each day are really endearing. They're either scientific comments on the wildlife of the planet, natural reminders on how to control the Pikmin and their abilities in case you're struggling, or just him reminiscing about his family and how much he longs to return to them. It all makes you grow attached to Olimar and want to make sure he can get off the planet alive. So Pikmin 1 has about 5 areas, but really only 3. The Forest of Hope, the Forest Navel, and the Distant Spring, with the impact site being more of a tutorial with 1 extra part requiring blue Pikmin, and the final trial being a glorified boss arena with a few obstacles that take an entire in-game day to remove. Unless you're one of those mad lads who can beat this game in 6 in-game days. Seriously, there are people who do that. Anyways, the Forest of Hope is perfectly fine, and the only parts of it that might be irritating to a degree are the burrowing snagrets, which can take forever to kill if you don't know to target their heads, and maybe the armored cannon beetle if you don't know what you're doing. The Distant Spring is a similar case despite the harder enemies, but aside from 2 specific enemies, which we'll touch on in a bit, they weren't that bad since they're expected by that point. The Forest Navel, however, isn't too bad once you learn how it operates, but during the first few days you spend here, and sometimes even when you learn the lay of the land, it is overwhelming. The fiery blowhogs love to hang out near the water, so any yellows that get torched will most likely run into the water and drown. And they can throw the Pikmin you've thrown onto it an absurd distance, meaning there's a strong chance that the reds you obviously brought because fire will end up getting chucked into the water and also drown. Speaking of the water, it's full of wollywogs that can easily flatten your Pikmin, and this is the first area you get blue Pikmin, meaning unless you spend some time growing a bunch of blues, you're not gonna have a whole lot to lose. On top of that, the area your spaceship lands in is surrounded by barriers that are more often than not guarded by sheer grubs and sheer wings, and for some reason they thought it was a good idea to put only 2 patches of bomb rocks on opposite ends of the map, both surrounded by water. Yay! Oh, I'm not done with the Forest Navel yet. No, sir. Remember how I said that 5 of the 30 ship parts were optional unless you want the good ending? Well, one of the required ship parts was eaten by one of the 3 large enemies that could be considered bosses, at least by the standards of the game. That being the beady longlegs. This thing is so big and stomps all over the place to the point where it can easily take out your Pikmin even when you're being careful. The Wikipedia recommends that you take no more than 30 yellow Pikmin because they can reach the body of the Knot Spider and damage it, and also because a squad that's any larger is harder to control. There's also flame geysers blocking the entrance, so you're gonna need to leave 20 or so reds at the door so they can carry the part without getting roasted. Lastly, the boss drops out of nowhere when you enter the arena, which can wipe out your party in an instant, even if you know it's coming. That's just plain cheap. The last thing I want to complain about are the 2 enemies in the Distant Spring I alluded to earlier, the puffy blowhogs and the swooping snitch bugs. The puffy blowhogs constantly blow away your Pikmin and love to hang out near the water, which spells doom for your reds and yellows if you aren't quick enough to save them, which you might not be considering how slow the Pikmin are to get up after being puffed. Even if you take a squad of all blues, it's annoying trying to keep them alive while taking out just one of these things. As for the swooping snitch bugs, they aren't as bad as the puffy blowhogs, but it's still annoying when they carry away your Pikmin and then slam them in the ground a few feet away. On their own, these enemies aren't sin-worthy, but when they're paired together, and they most often are, it's a hassle and a half to deal with. Before we get into the final boss, I want to touch on the bad ending in the game, which happens if you aren't able to get the minimum 25 ship parts by the end of the 30th day. What happens is that in an act of desperation, Olimar attempts to leave the planet with his unfinished ship, but the ship crashes and almost kills him. The Pikmin then carry his body to one of their onions, turning him into a Pikmin, which the fans have dubbed Pikmar. Pretty effective dour ending, wouldn't you say? The final boss against Emperor Bulblax is an appropriately serviceable final battle. Even though I had to reset once and even go back for more Pikmin, it never felt like the challenge was unfair. Its attacks are clearly telegraphed, you're given plenty of bomb rocks for stunning it, and while the jump attack can easily wipe out half your army, it isn't unavoidable BS or anything. I wouldn't necessarily call it a great final boss, but it does its job well enough as the final trial of the game.
Get it?
Man, the good ending hits just right. The triumphant feeling of finally rebuilding your ship and the slight goopiness of the Pikmin not understanding that Olimar is leaving potentially for good makes for an all-around satisfying conclusion to the adventure. Wow, short video, huh? To be honest, I'm as surprised as you guys are. I figured I was gonna have more to say, but I guess I don't. The only thing worth mentioning outside of the story is the challenge mode, but as far as I can tell, that's an optional score attack mode based on how many Pikmin you can grow in a single day. Yes, there is a maximum number of Pikmin that can be grown in each challenge mode stage, but according to the Pikipedia, it's impossible to grow said maximum number on the distant spring stage without resorting to assisted tools. So even if I did break my back over trying to grow a greenhouse of Pikmin in every stage, it'd ultimately be pointless since one stage is impossible without basically cheating. As far as the story goes, it's simple and to the point with little more than Olimar's diary entries to keep you moving. And as far as completion goes, all that matters is getting all the ship parts, which I did with only a small medium of frustration. That's pretty much Pikmin 1 in a nutshell. A short, simple, fun game with not much to say. Unless you're Arlo. Oh well, I still recommend Pikmin 1 if Nintendo ever decides to port it over to Switch, or you miraculously stumble upon it for a decent price online, or at your local old game store. Because even before Nintendo killed the Wii U eShop, the prices for both versions of this game are through the roof of absurdity. Lucky for me, I was able to snag both it and Pikmin 2 in time for the closure. Speaking of Pikmin 2, that'll be the next video on the docket, and perhaps I'll have more to say on that one. See you next time, everybody! Cool detail having the title screen change every time you boot up the game. It matches how the areas in this game represent the 4 seasons. And just in case you didn't play the first game, we get a quick little recap of said game. Don't know why you would play Pikmin 2 before Pikmin 1, but hey, at least they cared. Wait, hang on! You're telling me that the ship I worked so hard to rebuild in the first game is now just being sold off like junk? And I'm immediately being sent back to the planet I almost died on to pay off a stupid debt? Way to sour the first game's ending in a single minute. I like that this game introduces each of the Pikmin types from the first game while they're fighting wild creatures. It builds off the good ending in the first game where the Pikmin attack a Bulborb on their own after Olimar leaves. Obviously the Reds still have to be plucked by Louie for the sake of teaching that to the player, but it's nice that they bothered to keep continuity. Just like the previous game, the tutorial area does a great job of providing you with all the info you need for playing the game well, even for going the day system so that you can take your time. One of the new additions Pikmin 2 brings is 2 playable characters to control. It helps with scoping out areas of the map much more easily, and each character has their own unique whistle for rounding up the Pikmin. Olimar is the same whistle as before, Louie's got himself a train whistle, and when you unlock the president of Pocket Tape Freight in the post-game, he gets a car horn. The only real negative is that there's no option for co-op in the story, which is especially weird since the side modes allow for co-op, but as someone who plays games all by their lonesome, it's not enough to ruin it or anything. Also, remember how I said that the Wii version of Pikmin 1 used pointer controls that were superior to the GameCube version? Well, the same thing applies to Pikmin 2. Fluid controls with the Wii remote that feel supernatural all the time. The main gimmick of Pikmin 2 is the caves, and to be entirely honest, I'm not a fan of them. To get my positives out of the way, I like that each cave has a boss at the end that rewards you with an item that enhances Olimar and Louie in some way, be it immunity to fire and electricity, upgrades to the whistle, etc. But everything else about the caves kinda stinks. I'll get into specific cases as we go, but for now, I'll talk about general aspects of them. Numero uno. Most of them are aesthetically unappealing. More than half of the caves are just these dank and dirty brown walls for multiple floors. Obviously, I understand why that's the case, but just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's automatically good. It's pretty much the forest navel from Pikmin 1, but multiplied by 20. The rest of the themes are either rusty arenas and walkways, which are just as ugly as the caves, shower room floors, which are fine but not much better, garden floors, which don't look half bad, and children's playrooms, which are actually kinda cute. Unfortunately, the latter two don't show up very often, and when they do, they suffer from the fact that there's daylight on them where they shouldn't be. We're several feet underground. How is the sun reaching down here this well? Either way, I don't like the look of them that much. Another thing is, none of the caves have any real level design. Every floor in every cave is randomly generated. There are specific enemies, treasures, and rooms, but every time you reset your game or enter the cave again, the layout of all these things will be different. As you might imagine, this causes all sorts of problems. There can be breakable walls that lead to nowhere, as well as enemies and even entire rooms that are completely avoidable. It makes it incredibly difficult to form any coherent strategy for tackling the caves in what is supposed to be a real-time strategy game. You're just expected to go with whatever flow the floors decide, and in a lot of cases, it leads to a lot of unfair Pikmin deaths. Lastly, the day system is rendered null and void whenever you enter one of these caves. By that I mean time passes normally while you're exploring the areas, but it just freezes all of a sudden whenever you enter a cave. There's not really a good reason for this, nor do they attempt to provide one anywhere. Speaking of the day system, remember how I said that I thought the 30-day time limit in the first game wasn't that big of a problem as a lot of others did? Well, apparently back in 2001, enough people thought it was a problem because there's no time limit at all in Pikmin 2. You could spend as many days as you want to repay the debt. But if that's the case, why bother with a day system? I know that's how Pikmin 1 operated, but we've already established that time freezes in the caves, so you can't really fall back on that. The time limit in Pikmin 1 was an essential part of the game's design and story, and when you take that out for the sequel, it kind of breaks things from both perspectives. Alright, let's get back to some positives. First one being the graphics as a whole. Even though I personally didn't mind Pikmin 1's graphics, Pikmin 2 is the better looking of the two. There's a lot more detail and a lot more colors, at least when you're on the surface. They definitely upped the ante for one of the GameCube's last exclusives, and it paid off. I know I probably should have addressed this sooner, but I wanted to save it for outside the tutorial area, which meant going through the caves first. Another positive I got is that they gave yellow Pikmin immunity to electricity. In the previous game, they could be thrown higher and pick up bomb rocks, but they ditched the bomb rocks in favor of this. While what they did with the bomb rocks is pretty annoying, I can appreciate them giving yellows a bit more of a tangible use. Granted, the fact that electricity is an instant-death obstacle is a tad annoying, but luckily any hazards or enemies that utilize it can be clearly seen in advance and planned around. That said, the areas do leave something to be desired. Not only are two of them the same areas you explored in Pikmin 1, just with different names, those being the Forest of Hope and the Distant Spring, but they also blatantly reuse the map layouts from the first game. Now, the game doesn't exactly hide this, and you do find new stuff in these areas, but still, you can easily tell that they had corners to cut, especially when coming hot off the first game. Any sequel worth their salt adds new and interesting gameplay mechanics built off the first game, and Pikmin 2 does just that by introducing two new types of Pikmin. The first of which being the white Pikmin. These guys are immune to poison, can dig up treasures that are buried beneath the dirt, and are quite fast when curing said treasure. A great addition through and through. The other new type is the purple Pikmin, and I'm very mixed on them. On the one hand, their ability to carry more weight than a normal Pikmin at a much slower pace is neat and well balanced. But on the other hand, these chonky boys are absolutely broken when it comes to combat. Not only are they able to stun enemies for a good while, but they absolutely annihilate any enemy's health once thrown on. You don't even need that many of them. As long as you had 10 to 15 purples, you can pretty much destroy almost every obstacle. Granted, you still need reds for the fiery bullblacks and blues for enemies in the water, but for virtually every other enemy, including ones that you'd think would call for other Pikmin like Mungedweevils and Nano Beetles, can be mollywopped by just a few purples. I would understand it if these types were reserved for the last area of the game, but no. After the mandatory reds, purples are the first type you're given, and to be handed something that broken out of the gate is just poor balancing. Oh yeah, bulbmen are also a thing. They're a new parasitic form of Pikmin that are only usable in the caves. They're immune to any and all hazards and can be helpful for making up lost Pikmin. Delightful additions as well. Can't believe I went this long without talking about them, but the main collectible Pikmin 2 are the treasures, which can range widely in terms of value. In the previous game, there were subtle hints that the planet you were exploring was Earth, and this game makes that more obvious with the treasures being real-world objects. It doesn't feel like product placement either. Every treasure is given its own unique name, and it's funny to see how surprisingly close or how hilariously not close at all these names get. For example, naming a strawberry a sunseed berry, naming a hot dog a meat satchel, naming a crushed soda can utter scrap, and my personal favorite, naming a water chestnuts container patience tester. Patience tester. The final new mechanic Pikmin 2 introduces is the red and purple sprays. Farm 10 berries of each color and you get red and purple spray. The red spray temporarily powers up your Pikmin so they can move faster and do more damage to enemies. That's a neat addition all around. The purple spray, meanwhile, is one of the most broken things I've seen in the game. Use it on any enemy and they instantly turn to stone, letting you go to town on them at will until they either break out or you smash them to pieces. They even drop nectar for you to flower your Pikmin. It's pretty much an automatic win button for all combat scenarios, and with the non-existent time limit, you can farm absurd amounts of this stuff. Sure, with enemies like the Gatling Groink and the Bull Bear, it's nice that you have the option, but for everything else, it almost feels like cheating. Also, it makes a burp sound whenever you use it, and I don't like that. At the end of each day, you're met with emails from a number of people back on Hecate. The president, who has no shame in being a capitalist swine, Olimar's family, who are so lovely, Louie's grandma, who's a grandma, and whatever the hell this is. While I prefer the diary entries from Pikmin 1, the emails offer their own source of entertainment that I can't be mad at. And don't worry if you miss Olimar's thoughts on stuff, cause they're still here in the Piccolopedia. Every treasure you collect and enemy you kill is featured here, with Olimar making scientific remarks on every single one, while occasionally reminiscing about his family. We learn sweet things about him, like how he loves karaoke, he considers his children his life's work, and his wife likes to poke fun at him for thinking romantic thoughts. He also canonically smokes weed at one point, and that's the funniest thing in this game. Louie and the robot who collects treasure with you have their own thoughts as well. The robot tries to market all the treasures you collected once you get a specific set, and Louie, rather than offering scientific remarks about the wildlife, talks about how he would cook them all. That's the second funniest thing in this game. Okay, remember how I complained about the puffy blowhogs and swooping snitchbugs in Pikmin 1? Well, somebody at Nintendo thought it was a good idea to introduce a new iteration for both in the sequel. The bumbling snitchbug, which grabs your captains and flies higher than even your yellows can reach, and the withering blowhog, which blows away your Pikmin faster than a puffy blowhog. Thanks a lot, Nintendo, I'm so happy! The subterranean complex is easily one of the worst caves in this game. You got 9 floors to traverse, and they're filled to the brim with enemies like armored cannon beetle larvae, which can spew out boulders, volatile dweevils, which can blow up your Pikmin, Korean bugs, which throw bomb rocks at you, and the aforementioned Gatling Groinks, which laser death beam your Pikmin at every opportunity, and can even come back to life if you don't drag its carcass back to your ship. Sure, if you have some purple spray on hand, these guys can be mitigated, but what can't be mitigated are the bomb rocks that just randomly fall right out of the sky. Yeah, and they have a timer for you to get away from them, but the corridors are often tight and cramped, so getting your squad of 100 Pikmin away from them is easier said than done. Lastly, the boss of this cave is the Man at Legs, which is basically the Beady Long Legs if it traded its stompy feet for a turret. Screw this cave, I hate it. In fact, bomb rocks falling from the sky aren't exclusive to the subterranean complex. No, they can fall from the sky in most of the caves, along with giant insta-kill rocks and even entire enemies, including some really dangerous ones. Who thought this was a good idea? Was that person a masochist? Oftentimes, what I would do to try to mitigate this is to send one of my captains out with little to no Pikmin and scout out the area to trigger all the traps, which is incredibly tedious. And even then, 1 or 2 end up being triggered anyway when I bring all my Pikmin through. I may have my issues with the forest naval being overwhelming, but this is just ridiculous. Cool reveal, but is there any reason why Olimar didn't immediately turn around and go back for Louis? The ship is clearly traveling at light speed, so going back would be quick and snappy. I know it ultimately starts an excuse for the president to replace Louis in the postgame, but still. I love that the credits are live-action footage with a stop-motion Louis on it. At least I assume it's a stop-motion Louis. It doesn't look like the in-game models, but either way, it's cool that they did this. I know I've been pretty negative on the caves for the majority of this video, but believe it or not, there is one legitimately good cave in this whole game. That being the submerged castle. Not only are you restricted to blue Pikmin from the very moment you enter, but if you spend too much time on any given floor, folks, meet the Water Wraith, an invincible monster that will do everything in its power to steamroll you and your Pikmin. The tension is through the roof as you gotta grab the treasures and immediately book it for the exit before the Lovecraftian horror shows up. And that background music is so unnerving and broken. The Wraith itself is also never explained. Nothing in the Piccolopedia has any implications of its origins, and even Hungry Louie can't think of anything noteworthy. The cave also doesn't overstay its welcome as it's only 5 floors, and when you finally get some purples at the end and use them to kill this thing, it's a well-rounded comeback. If I were to remake my top 9 video game stalker list from 2021, you better believe that this thing is getting on there. The Hole of Heroes is the longest cave in the game and is meant to be one of the post-game challenges. However, even taking that into consideration, this cave is brutal. Every variation of every enemy type gets their own unique floor, and with the floors being randomized every time, you can get f***ed over on a whim. Plus, the later floors are just previous bosses you fought, and 2 of them in particular, the Man-at Legs and the Beatty Longlegs, are surrounded by water. So I hope you brought some blues and didn't lose any on the way. Although, I will say, the fact that the last treasure you get in the cave is Rob's head, and it's even named Remembered Old Buddy, is rather heartwarming. So for the grand majority of the game, the treasures you collect aren't all that tough to nab. Unless you're extremely careless, you'll always have enough Pikmin to carry any treasures you find. There is, however, one exception to this, and anyone who's played Pikmin 2 knows and dreads this thing. The Doomsday Apparatus. This rusty barbell is one of the post-game collectibles required for 100%, and it requires 100 purple Pikmin to collect. What's so bad about that? Well, you see, the thing about purples and whites is that these Pikmin don't have their own dedicated onion like the previous types. You can only get them from their corresponding candy pop buds located in the caves. But even if you capitalize on every purple candy pop bud you find in all the caves, you won't have enough purples by the time you reach the Wistful Wilds, which is where the Doomsday Apparatus lies. Not only that, but you can't just go to any random cave and grind for more purples because not every candy pop bud respawns. The Wikipedia recommends that you go all the way down to the 8th floor of the subterranean complex so that you can efficiently grind on some purples. Personally, thanks to the handy-dandy reset button that lets me redo a cave floor if I ever lost a purple, I ended up with around 80 purples after doing almost every other cave. At the 8th floor, you can only get 15 purples before needing to go back in, so I only had to make 2 trips. But for a casual player who isn't aware of the Doomsday Apparatus, you might end up with 40 or 50 or even less purples than that, which means you gotta make 4 to 5 trips through 8 whole floors to reach 100. I know this is a post-game optional treasure, but remember what I said in my first ERAWW. I view all the games I cover from the lens of a completionist, meaning I need to get the stupid barbell, which led to so many resets that truly made me rage. To add insult to injury, retrieving the weight takes up a quarter of your day because of how slow the Pikmin are. You ever wonder what 2 miles per hour looks like? Well, there you go. That's it in action. The Dream Den isn't as bad as the Hole of Heroes. In fact, for a final level, it's actually pretty alright. But sub-level 10 in particular can f*** right off. It's mostly water, which means you need your blue Pikmin to get through it, assuming you even brought or still have any. And the enemy lineup is a terrible combination of fiery blowhogs, water dumples, wollywogs, lesser spotted jelly floats, and a Gatling groink. The last one you need purple spray for, otherwise you're gonna have a terrible time dealing with it, as well as dragging its corpse back to the ship. You better be ready to reset the level a few times, because if those things are in any unfair position, say goodbye to your Pikmin. The Titan Dweeble is the final boss of the game, and it's actually pretty good. Dare I say, it's the best part of the game. It utilizes weapons of all four elements in ways that don't feel cheap, and with proper usage of red sprays, it's not overly difficult to take down. Sure, sometimes a shock therapist can decimate your Pikmin in an instant, but that doesn't happen all that often. Plus, if you take out the shock therapist first, you'll have an easier time with the rest of the fights. Or you can just take a squad of all yellows. You'll miss out on all the treasures, but hey, the electricity can't kill you. Also, there's implications in the Picklepedia that Louis hijacked the Titan Dweeble's brain, and he's the one trying to kill you. Why would he do that, you ask? Because he's secretly a villain. No, seriously, he deliberately stayed on the planet causing you more trouble for his boss and coworker, and do you really think a wild animal like the Titan Dweeble will be smart enough to wield these complex weapons? I don't think so. Also, I should mention the final boss music. It's not one of the best tracks I've heard or anything, but it fits with the fight and creates a solid atmosphere. Plus, the music gets crazier the more weapons you destroy, which showcases the panic in the Titan Dweeble, aka Louis' mind as they start losing. You know, Olimar and the Pikmin have such a beautiful symbiotic relationship. Olimar made the Pikmin strong enough to survive, and the Pikmin helped Olimar save his company. So in the ending, they thank him in their own way, with a pretty light show. So unlike Pikmin 1, the challenge mode is required for 100%, and man, what a strain this process is. The way it works is that you get 2 ranks depending on how well you finish a set amount of floors with a set amount of Pikmin and sprays. Completing it normally nets you a white flower, and completing it with every Pikmin alive and with every treasure nabbed nets you a pink flower. While this isn't too much of an ask for the first 10 challenges, the rest of them get more and more arduous with each passing moment. This is yet another reason why the Ks shouldn't have been randomized, because a challenge mode is specifically designed for you to strategize ways around the enemies presented. But with the random nature of the Ks, you can't make a strategy for them. You just have to deal with whatever comes your way as fast as possible, which is incredibly annoying. And just what are you rewarded with for completing all 30 challenges with a pink flower rating? Why, a special cutscene that further proves that Louis is secretly the main villain of Pikmin 2. I kinda figured that from the get-go, but hey, the cutscene is cute, I guess. Before playing Pikmin 2, I knew that it had a mixed reputation. Some fans really love it and consider it their favorite, while others don't particularly care for it all that much. And after completing it 100%, I can see why. This is the first era to have both counters get so close to each other, and that's pretty much how I feel about the game. For every part of it that I like, there's at least one other thing that drags it down. And unlike Pikmin 1, where all the negatives could be summed up in just a few select moments, Pikmin 2 has problems that perpetuate throughout most of the game. It's definitely not the worst game I've played, nor is it the worst sequel I've played, but it is flawed in so many ways to the point where I can only barely say that I liked it. Overall, I did enjoy my time with the game, but while I can see myself returning to Pikmin 1 in a year or two, Unless I need to for a future video, I don't think I'll be coming back to Pikmin 2 anytime soon. Apparently Ks are returning in Pikmin 4, but if they want me excited for it, they need to fix almost everything about Pikmin 2's Ks. They need actual level design, no cheap bullshit falling from the sky, unique themes and mechanics for most of, if not all of them, and no resurrecting enemies. Fix that, and maybe the Ks will be good. In the meantime, you guys got Pikmin 3 to look forward to. Specifically Pikmin 3 Deluxe, because I'm a completionist now. I've heard a lot of good stuff about that game, so hopefully it'll be a better experience than Pikmin 2. See you next time, everybody.
Galactic date 20XX. At the far reaches of space lies a planet on the brink of ruin. The planet's name? Kopai. Due to a booming population, booming appetites, and a basic lack of planning, Kopai's inhabitants have all but exhausted their food supply. Their only hope is to find another planet with edible matter. Accordingly, they send unmanned scout vessels called Sparrows out into space. To their dismay, the search is proving fruitless. Just as they're about to give up, the final vessel reports back with news of a miraculous discovery. They mobilize to investigate the planet, which they name PNF 404. Kopai's last hope rests on 3 intrepid explorers.
Oh good, we actually have proper motivation to return to PNF 404 this time. Granted, it's with new characters, but anything's better than going there for debt. So Pikmin 3 has 2 tutorial areas this time around, one more for story purposes, but both for gameplay purposes. And just like Pikmin 1 and 2, they get across everything you need to know about growing and using Pikmin well. Though I will say, when you build bridges using piles of wood, the Pikmin will always return to the spot the pile was, even when there's no more pieces left. And that gets annoying over time. You can catch them with the whistle before they get there, but that's not always possible in every scenario, so yeah. The end-of-day diary entries return from Pikmin 1, and they're just as enjoyable as in that game. Plus, with all 3 characters you can play as, each one that happens to write the diary entry that night has their own little flair to add. Time to talk about graphics again, and holy shit, this game is beautiful! I know Pikmin technically skipped out on the Wii with Pikmin 1 and 2 only getting ported, but damn, how do we go from this to this to this in only 3 games? The only remotely not so great thing about the graphics is the Pikmin models look a little too shiny, but aside from that, this game is never going to age. You gotta give the Wii U credit. It may not have been as powerful as the PS4 or Xbox One, but at its best, it could certainly pull its own weight. Carrying over from Pikmin 2 is the ability to control 2 and eventually 3 captains, and they fine-tuned it to almost perfection. Not only is there co-op in the main campaign now, but you can also throw captains across gaps and have them travel to a set point with smaller squads of Pikmin. It is a little awkward having to throw a captain before being able to switch to them, and they all share the same whistle instead of having unique whistles, but those are largely minor things. Plus, once you get another captain, you can engage in conversations before each day. They're not much, but they expand on each captain's character. So remember how Pikmin 2 introduced 2 new Pikmin and one was a neat addition while the other was broken as f***? Well, those 2 were shoved into the mission mode to make way for the 2 new Pikmin, and this time, both are equally useful. Starting off with the Rock Pikmin, these guys pack a punch, can break glass barriers, and are helpful with killing the new Scutterchuck enemies, with the only drawback being that they don't latch onto enemies. They just land a big hit and roll. A great addition. The other new type is the Winged Pikmin, and while these guys are debatably the weakest Pikmin, they have their uses as well. They can carry objects over bodies of water and are great at handling flying enemies. They don't do much damage to other enemies, but they're not useless at all. Although, to detour to the other types, I feel like this game makes some very small yet weird changes in an attempt to make me like yellows more. Let me explain. Bomb rocks return as useful items, but now all Pikmin can use them rather than just being exclusive to yellows. What's more, with whites being absent from the story, all Pikmin can now dig up buried fruit, and for some reason they made yellows the fastest diggers? And okay, to be fair, yellows still have their legitimate uses through their immunity to electricity and occasional puzzles involving powering up a light source. But not only has electricity been nerfed to only immobilize any non-yellows rather than kill them, but said puzzles are both few and far between and as simple as throw a bunch of them on the wire. On top of that, they're the first type you're introduced to instead of the usual reds. Granted, you can't keep that group of yellows for story reasons, but still, it's weird that they tried this hard to make yellows seem better than they are. I know in Pikmin 1 they were more situational than anything, but Pikmin 2 had them down almost perfectly. All these little additions come off as trying too hard for no reason. Thankfully, not all the new tweaks are like this. The rest of them include, but are not limited to, refined type switching so you don't accidentally use a type you don't want, a charge attack that helps for taking down barriers and bomb rushing enemies, a lock-on, finally, and merging all the individual onions into one giant onion after they're found. It's the little things, you know? Oh yeah, red spray also returns from Pikmin 2. It's not as easy to grind as it is in that game, but it's still useful for dealing with harder enemies, even if I didn't use it that often. Was that? Where's the purple spray? Oh, don't worry about that. Let's talk collectibles. Pikmin 1 had ship parts, Pikmin 2 had treasures, and Pikmin 3 has fruit. All sorts of fruit, really, from the same fruit we collected in Pikmin 2 to entirely new fruit. The new ones are even given their own unique names, while the old ones keep their original names. And while none of them get as funny as the names in Pikmin 2, there are still some fun ones, like naming a watermelon a Crimson Banquet, naming a lime a Zest Bomb, naming a raspberry a Juicy Gaggle, and naming a lemon a Face Wrinkler. The fruit also factors into this game's attempt at a time limit. You technically have an unlimited amount of days to find all the fruit and parts for your ship, unless you run out of juice gained from the fruit you collect. This sounds like a cool concept, but in practice, it feels too generous. You'd think that needing more juice to get more days would be a good reason to not waste time, but after like 3 to 5 days of diligent fruit collecting, you'll have more juice than you'll ever need. Maybe it's because I've gotten really good at playing Pikmin, but the only times I ever felt pressed to get more juice was during the first few days when I had very little to start with, and at the halfway point where Louie stole all the juice I had, the grief. Everywhere else, while I still had good enough reason to collect fruit to save Kopai from starvation, it didn't feel that much tension, if you know what I mean. Looking at this trilogy, I've noticed that the areas tend to be somewhat middling. In Pikmin 1, they were just fine with only one being kind of irritating, and in Pikmin 2, 2 of them were straight up reused maps from Pikmin 1, with the others just being okay. Pikmin 3 kind of follows suit in this trend, but I do gotta give it credit for having all original areas based on the 4 seasons. No reused maps here, folks. With the caves being removed entirely, Pikmin 3 has specific spots for bosses and mini-bosses. Most of the mini-bosses aren't anything to write home about, but the times where the Shaggy Longlegs pops up is honestly worse than Pikmin 1's Beady Longlegs. At least the Beady Longlegs had only one spot you had to attack, and the Stompy feat could be avoided with practice. Here, you can't just attack the body. No. You gotta give it a haircut first by attacking the balls of hair on its legs, which is so unnecessary and opens up the opportunity to lose more Pikmin than you ever would normally. The bosses, meanwhile, are legit the best ones in the series so far. They get their own unique arenas, and they're quite the spectacle by Pikmin standards. Starting with the Armor Maw-Dad, it's a great first boss. It's simple to understand and gives Rock Pikmin a chance to shine. Perfect for the types you're given at the start. Also, I gotta hand it to the boss team for being a good bop. It's not amazing or anything, but it sets the mood for each fight that's not the final boss. The next boss in the lineup is the Behemoth Fozbat. This one's interesting because it's not as simple as just throwing Pikmin onto it. Around the caves are light bulbs that you need to use yellow Pikmin to light up, specifically when it comes near them, and when it does, it'll be vulnerable for a bit. It'll even summon normal Fozbats at half health. Really creative use for yellows. After that, you get the sand-belching Mirror Slug, and while this one is probably my least favorite, it's still a good boss. Bomb rocks are the star this time around, as you're recommended to use them when it attempts to suck you in, especially when the inhale radius engulfs the whole arena. It's a pretty standard fight outside of that, but props to giving bomb rocks a bit more creative use. Sidetracking a bit, the Piccolopedia returns, and all the enemies you kill have their own notes, from Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, the 3 explorers you control, with Louie and Olimar joining in once you save them later in the game. Alf, being the engineer, talks about how the enemies are biologically structured. Brittany, being the botanist, talks about their aesthetics mainly. She also has some notes about all the fruit you collect, and some of them imply that she has romantic feelings for Alf. Interesting. Charlie, the main captain, speaks about his experience killing them, Louie is still on about how he would cook them all, and Olimar has his usual scientific remarks. Still as great as before. After receiving a transmission from Louie, you gotta save him from the Scornet Maestro. It uses Scornets to dive bomb you and your Pikmin, and the formations are a spinning drill, or bee stinger I guess, fighter airplane formations, and a circular formation. That last one can be annoying since it takes away half your Pikmin if you can't get out, but for the most part, the fight's still fun. Plus it gives winged Pikmin their turn in the spotlight.
듣고 싶다고 뺐네요. 그러니 또는 그냥 요한테.
Caio, Orimus tak czuwaj. Mykany zyksı am soha captain tak czuwaj.
뭐야?
See guys, I told you, Louie is a villain. Alf and company saved his ass and he responds with stealing all their supplies and running off. That's a villain, guys, and a f***ing hilarious one at that. And to get him back, you gotta fight the Quaggle Meyerclops. The fight isn't that complex, just keep your non-blues away from the water, use your Pikmin on the legs to make it fall over, break the fruit at the top out of its crystal, and go to town on it while making sure to keep your Pikmin away from the tongue. Nothing too complex, but I will say that this thing is massive. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the biggest creature in the whole Pikmin series, and taking it down feels like you're toppling a titan. Great sense of scale. So do you guys remember how great the submerged castle was in Pikmin 2? Well, have any of you ever asked, if the submerged castle was so great, why isn't there a submerged castle 2? Well, guess what? Pikmin 3 asked that same question and made one in the form of the formidable Oak, home of the Plasm Wraith. Basically, Olimar got captured by the Plasm Wraith while looking for treasures, and you gotta escort him out of the formidable Oak with the Plasm Wraith in hot pursuit. The tension here is almost on the same level as the submerged castle. Brittany is the one leading the Pikmin carrying Olimar, so you gotta clear the way of enemies and barriers while also keeping Brittany away from the Plasm Wraith. Granted, that much into 2 hearts, it's all you need to do is make Brittany run in circles until the way is clear, but there's still plenty of tension as the day is still progressing as you do all of this. And the Oak is so big that you're never going to be able to get out in a single day. It'll take multiple days for you to accurately clear a path for Brittany and the Pikmin. And that music is eerie as easily on the same level as the submerged castle, and it gets even more tense when the Wraith closes in on Olimar. But guess what? All of that was merely a prelude to the final boss, the Plasm Wraith itself. And this thing does not go down easily. You gotta use every single Pikmin type, or just 100 rock Pikmin, to break this thing down into pieces and then destroy those pieces, either by attacking it normally, or destroying the cubes it spits out with specific types of Pikmin. Meanwhile, the Wraith will try to impale your Pikmin and even take to the skies for more mobility, requiring you to use your winged Pikmin to knock it down. Don't be surprised if you need to retry the fight, cause you'll need to bring your A game. And on top of that, this is the one Pikmin boss in the whole series that you don't kill. All of your effort to save Olimar only results in making it back off. Even the water Wraith was killed at the end of the submerged castle. Fantastic final boss. And to accompany it, it's got a great final boss theme. It mixes the eeriness of this eldritch horror with the climactic feeling of this final battle. I'm not sure if I prefer the Titan Dweevils theme or this one, but either way, it's a great theme through and through. So there are two versions of Pikmin 3 currently out there. The original Pikmin 3 for the Wii U and Pikmin 3 Deluxe, the Switch port released in 2020. I played Pikmin 3 Deluxe for this video, and the new content made to justify the Deluxe part of the title is prologue and epilogue content called Olimar's Assignment and Olimar's Comeback respectively. Just what is this new content all about, you ask? Well, they basically made Pikmin 1 and 2 wear a trench coat and shoved them into the game. No, seriously, Olimar's Assignment is Olimar and Louie searching for treasure on PNF 404 again, because Hakate Freight got into debt again, and Olimar's Comeback is Olimar and Louie trying to rebuild their crashed ship after Alpha Company worked so hard to save them. Okay, at this point, I know Pikmin isn't a game series with the most brilliant storytelling ever, but come on! You really had to reuse the plots of the first two games in order to justify the prologue and epilogue content? Don't get me wrong, the content itself, gameplay-wise, isn't bad, but when the story is this laughably poor, it makes you wonder what the point even is. But I do like the opening mission logs for Olimar's Assignment. They're charming, and it's funny to see Louie get beaten up by the wildlife. That's the one good part of the prologue story. There's also mission mode, which is exactly what it says it is, and all the missions aren't anything noteworthy. What is noteworthy is how they treated the purple Pikmin. The lights remain the same as ever, but the purples received a major overhaul. Remember how I complained about how broken they were in Pikmin 2? Well, someone at Nintendo thought it was a good idea to fix the purples by completely breaking them. They don't stun enemies anymore, their homing is straight up broken even when using the lock-on, and the damage they do is pitiful. Purples literally went from the best Pikmin ever to damn near useless outside of their ability to lift more weight than a normal Pikmin, which is the only thing that remains intact. Guys, the purples being broken in Pikmin 2 was a legitimate problem, but that doesn't mean the solution is going in the opposite direction in the next game. Limiting them to mission mode probably would have been enough already. Why did you need to do all this? The last new thing that Pikmin 3 Deluxe adds is badges, which are basically in-game achievements. There are badges for the story, mission mode, side stories, bingo battle, a 2-player battle mode that's just there, and special dedicated badges. One such badge that I want to mention is the Pikmin Master Badge. This is earned by beating the story on Ultra Spicy difficulty, which is unlocked by beating the story on Hard difficulty, which was my default playthrough. Now, I wouldn't say that Pikmin 3 is a particularly challenging game outside of the bosses, even on hard difficulty, but Ultra Spicy difficulty does change some things that do make for a challenging experience, such as getting less juice from the fruits you collect, lowering the max amount of Pikmin you can have in the field from 100 to 60, and having Pikmin drown faster in the water. Small things, but nonetheless important things that make for an interesting second playthrough. Still the easiest Pikmin game so far, but it's nice to have that extra challenge. When playing the previous games, I figured that Pikmin was going to be this little series that I liked but never loved. I definitely liked Pikmin 1 enough to give it another go in the future, but didn't really care for Pikmin 2 all that much. So I figured the same would hold true for Pikmin 3. Boy was I wrong. It may have taken a decade's worth of releases, but I've finally found a Pikmin game that I genuinely love. It may not be one of my favorite games ever or anything, but I genuinely had a great time with Pikmin 3. Granted, I did experience some burnout towards the end of the completionist part, but playing it the way most people do, this is a great game. Easily the best one so far. I'm hoping the same holds true for Pikmin 4 when it releases, but before that, we're going to take a detour to Hey Pikmin, aka Pikmin 3.5. Most people don't or choose to not remember this little side game, including Nintendo by the way, and the few fans that do don't really like it because of how different it is from the other games. That possibly paints a rough picture for me, but it's part of the Pikmin canon, so I gotta complete it. See you next time, everybody! My goodness, what is this, the third or fourth time Olimar's crashed his ship? Like, he crashed it in Pikmin 1 after getting blindsided by an asteroid, he almost crashes it in Pikmin 2 due to turbulence, he crashed it off-screen for unknown reasons in Pikmin 3, and he crashes it again in Hey Pikmin. Either Olimar has the worst luck imaginable, or the writers have gotten incredibly lazy, because this is several crashes too many. Well, at least the tutorial still manages to do a good job. Everything about playing the game well is taught to you here as well as it can be. Though, as a bit of a side note, did any of you ever wonder why this game is called Hey Pikmin? Well, it's because Olimar now shouts hey before blowing his whistle. Imagine naming your entire game after a noise the main character makes. Also, his voice is now high-pitched, even though it was a lot deeper in Pikmin 3, and even in certain cutscenes in this game. Am I nitpicking? Well, the shout happens constantly and it's consistent errors, so I'd say I'm not. For a game on the 3DS, Hey Pikmin looks pretty damn good. It's not the best looking game on the 3DS. In fact, that prize would probably go to one of the Mario and Luigi games, but it's still a colorful and fairly detailed game, especially with the artwork in the background. Almost gives me Ori vibes. Also, as a side note, this is the one Pikmin game that runs at 60 FPS in select moments, which I honestly find more hysterical than anything. Like, the first two games couldn't run at 60 on the GameCube and the Wii, and apparently couldn't be bothered to run at 60 when ported to the Switch. And Pikmin 3 and 4 are also stuck at 30 on the consoles they reside on. But the spin-off on the 3DS? Yeah, sure, that can run everything but the normal gameplay smooth as butter. Okay, I've stalled for long enough. It's time to address the elephant in the room. Hey Pikmin is not a traditional Pikmin game. It's a 2D puzzle platformer with Pikmin elements. This is the main reason people choose to ostracize it from the Pikmin series, which after completing it, I honestly find rather petty. Just because a game is different from the others in its series doesn't mean it's automatically bad. Resident Evil 4 is one of the greatest games in history, and it's very different from previous Resident Evil games. Because of this, I'm not going to judge Hey Pikmin in comparison to the others. I'm going to judge it as a game on its own. Plus, let's face facts, a traditional Pikmin game would never have worked on the 3DS. It's honestly miraculous that games like Metal Gear Solid 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles even run at all on this thing. So Hey Pikmin choosing to do its own thing makes more sense than you'd think. With that said, how did the Pikmin handle? Quite well, actually. The 5 from Pikmin 3 are all here, with purples and whites being MIA completely this time, and everything that was good about them before is retained here, with some of them getting new additions. For instance, reds are not only fire resistant, but they can also put out any fires in your way. Yellow's ability to be thrown higher is the most effective it's ever been, since it covers both screens on the 3DS, allowing them to nab items and collectibles and take out enemies that may be out of reach. And the Wingeds can now carry Olimar after falling down for a bit, acting as a pseudo glide down pits or through wind currents. Cool additions if I do say so myself. Also, after every stage, all the Pikmin you have with you at the end are sent to the Pikmin Park, a small side area. There's not much here other than letting the Pikmin you collect search for exclusive treasures and Sparklium, but it's cute nonetheless, and fun to see it fill up with more and more Pikmin. Plus, if you have the Pikmin amiibo, you can actually summon Pikmin from the park if you're ever in a jam. That's cool too. Speaking of Sparklium, that's the main collectible of this game. It's the fuel source for Olimar's ship, and you can find it either around the stages, in these little Sparklium springs that are only accessible once per day, and on the various treasures you collect. Each stage has around 2 to 4 treasures hidden in them, and they honestly rival the ones in Pikmin 2, both in terms of what you find, such as pieces of a toy robot and even NES and Game Boy cartridges, and the names given to them, like naming a pen a peace missile, naming an eraser an evidence pulverizer, naming a cell phone a work-life imbalancer, getting a little too real there, hey Pikmin, and my personal favorites, naming a yo-yo a quid pro quo yo. Try saying that 5 times fast. The Sparklium also serves as an upgrade system. Your end goal is 30,000 Sparklium, but there are also milestones that give you upgrades when reached, such as more health and longer jetpack usage. It's not much, but it's nice to have these upgrades. Oh yeah, Olimar has a jetpack in this game, because apparently in the Pikmin universe, jumping is strictly prohibited outside of a cutscene. While I was able to get used to it, the jetpack is pretty clunky. It's not like you're able to fly with it or anything, it only propels you a short distance into the air. And with the level design of all the levels, having a normal jump would have been just as good, if not better. Anyways, I should also bring up the Piccolopedia, and while this is probably the weakest version of it, it still retains some of its charm. All the enemies and treasures are logged here, with Olimar commenting on all of them. Some are simple scientific remarks about the wildlife and structures, with the SS Dolphin 2 chiming in occasionally. Yeah, his new ship is also a sentient robot. And others are him reminiscing about his family, both happily and not so happily. Also, someone in the comments section of the previous video said that Olimar should lead the president after all the shite he was put through in Pikmin 3. And apparently this game reveals just why Olimar is still working for him. All because he happened to do something nice for him that one time. I mean, sure, whatever floats your boat, Olimar, but you gotta realize he's still a scumbag, right? Most of the levels in Hey Pikmin aren't anything special, but there are 2 in particular that stand out. The first one being Over the Wintry Mountains. It's a slide level down a snowy hill where you take out enemies and obstacles at breakneck speed. Quite the adrenaline rush with some neat music. The other one is the Bed of Fallen Leaves. It's a Balloon Trip reference, and one of the treasures in the level is an NES cartridge of Balloon Trip. Love it when Nintendo references old properties. So what are the completion requirements this time around? Well, a few things. Getting 30,000 Sparklium and defeating the final boss are just the first steps. There's also filling out the Piccolopedia with all the treasures and enemies, which you'll probably have once you beat every level. And there are also Amiibo exclusive treasures, which I ultimately chose to view as optional since it was tied to Amiibo, and the game didn't seem to count them for 100% completion. Plus, the Pikmin Amiibo I ordered would take a week to arrive, and with the release of Pikmin 4 fast approaching, I couldn't afford to wait that long. That leaves the last thing required for 100%, the Gold Pikmin Badges. These badges are earned by finding all 20 Pikmin in a level, getting to the end without getting any of them killed, and not using the Pikmin Amiibo to summon anymore. This is actually a pretty neat challenge. While it did lead to several rage-inducing moments, it never felt truly unfair. And when you finally get that one good run where all the Pikmin are saved, it feels satisfying. Solid challenge all around. You may have noticed that I've neglected the bosses up until now, and there's a good reason for that. They all suck. You know those normal enemies you encountered in the previous games like Bulborbs and Fiery Blowhogs? Well, they were promoted to boss status in this game, and it really shows why that shouldn't have been done. All 8 of the normal bosses are as simple as avoid attack, hit it a certain way to stun it, go to town on it with your Pikmin, rinse and repeat. Bear in mind, this is after Pikmin 3 gave us a lineup of really good bosses, so seeing these aggressively simple bosses is kind of disheartening. Even the Emperor Bulbwax, while intimidating when filling up both screens, suffers from this same problem, and considering how dangerous it was in Pikmin 1 and 2, that's disappointing. But the one good thing about them is that they have pretty good music. Not all of them, but most of them do have some good bops that soften the blow a bit. Okay, maybe I slightly lied earlier because there is one good boss in this game. That being the final boss, the Berserk Leech Hydro. This fight has 3 phases, and while all of them are pretty simple, they're intense enough to make the fight work. Plus, the impressive scale of the creature coupled with some pretty cool music for each phase makes the fight even more intense. Aww, no matter how many times he leaves them, Olimar still cares about the Pikmin. It's bittersweet, but necessary if he wants to see his family again. Though I guess by now, the Pikmin are also part of his family, and they feel just the same. While I hadn't heard anything too bad about this game going in, I knew that fans had some ambivalence towards this game. Very few actually care to remember it, while the rest act like it never existed. And after completing it, hell, while completing it, my only reaction was, seriously? This is a game that every fan calls the worst Pikmin game. This is the game that people hate to remember. This is the game that Shea Frills will not talk about despite being willing to plug Pikmin Bloom. Like, yeah, it's not great, but this is nowhere near a bad game. Maybe not a good Pikmin game, but this is a perfectly alright game in its own right. Like, the most negative emotion I felt when playing this, aside from the occasional frustration over getting the gold badges, was boredom. And it wasn't even close to the amount of boredom I felt when playing Sonic Chronicles or Sonic Rivals 2. Let it be known that I am not a purist of anything. In fact, I genuinely hate purists for how obnoxious they can be. Obviously, I understand people wanting a franchise to be a certain way, since that's what the franchise made its name on, and that's what they love about it. But every purist I've seen takes it way too far, to the point where they'll dismiss a game as lesser just because it's not like the others in its series, regardless of its actual quality, which is the worst way to view any game in my opinion. Don't judge a game based on what it isn't or chooses not to be. Judge it for what it is. And for what Hey Pikmin is, this is not the worst Pikmin game. For me, Pikmin 2 is actually much worse, as blasphemous as that sounds, because it has a lot more issues with it that genuinely make me feel worse when playing it than when I played Hey Pikmin. And for any Pikmin purists in the audience who are still trying to say it's the worst because it's not a traditional Pikmin game, let me put it this way. Hey Pikmin knows it can't be a traditional game, and doesn't try to be. It chose to be its own thing with the Pikmin elements put into it, whereas Pikmin 2 is trying to be a traditional Pikmin game, but fails as often as it succeeds. But either way, I think we can all agree that Pikmin 1 is better than both. With that said, there's only one Pikmin game left to cover before our series ends. And no, it's not you, Pikmin Bloom, you don't count. As of writing this, Pikmin 4 releases in 5 days, so I'll be waiting in my closet for it, because I know the Pikmin 2 fanboys are really gonna be on me after this video. See you next time, everybody!
Banyak di Palau Perata. Waktu ujung dalam Mamana Yumanas Pa. Muswa, Captain Orima. Windu, Gero, Nuru, the Dolphin. Debris.
He crashed his ship again? I'm definitely blaming the writers for this one, because there's no way Olimar's this bad of a pilot. For the first time in a Pikmin game, you get to create and play as your own custom character. The customization isn't that broad, but for what it is, it's cool. Just be careful which color spacesuit you wear, because whichever color you choose, the rest of the rescue corps wear too. So don't just pick the color that looks good on only your character. I would know, as I picked pink the first time and had to suffer through hours of everyone else wearing pink until I could change it back to red. By the way, in case any of you are wondering, this is my character. I named her Tina. Yes, it's literally just a default character setting save for a different hairstyle. I'm so creative, I know.
Aw, it's a puppy!
It's tutorial time, and we're batting 5 for 5 with this one. It's a bit long for story reasons, but it's still effective in teaching you what you need to know. Fun fact regarding the graphics of Pikmin 4, this is one of only 2 Switch exclusives to utilize Unreal Engine. The other one being Yoshi's Crafted World. And they seriously need to use it more often, because this game is gorgeous! The sheer amount of detail, the vibrance in the colors, the shockingly smooth performance, the water, my goodness, the water. This whole game is pure eye candy. Granted, it isn't perfect, the load times can be a little long, and there is some pixelation on the character models, but other than that, Pikmin 4 is not only the current best looking Pikmin game, but in my opinion, the best looking Switch game. Move over Luigi's Mansion 3 and Xenoblade 3, Pikmin 4's got both of you beats. Okay, time to talk about the signature Pikmin. We got returning types and 2 new types. Which ones did they decide to bring back? No, I'm not joking. Every single Pikmin type ever introduced in the series prior returns in Pikmin 4. Reds, blues, yellows, whites, purples, rocks, and wingeds, they're all here. And surprisingly, they managed to balance out all of them. Reds, blues, and yellows are the same as before. Whites retain their traits from Pikmin 2, although I think their speed when carrying treasure was nerfed. Rocks and wingeds remain as cool as ever, and purples are finally good. Not only do you not get them until much later in the game, and in small amounts, but their damage output was slightly nerfed when latching onto enemies, and their stun was removed. They're still the best fighters and retain their strength and movement speed, but with these new balances, they're no longer invalidating every other type. As for the new types, the first one is the Ice Pikmin. These guys can freeze bodies of water as long as you have the required amount of them, and they can temporarily freeze enemies after doing enough damage, essentially acting as a less broken version of the purple spray from Pikmin 2. They're a cool addition to the Pikmin roster, and they don't invalidate the blues either, as you'll still need them for treasures and enemies below the surface. Oh, and we'll talk about the other new type a bit later. Right now, though, we're going to talk more in depth about our other new addition to the Pikmin formula, the Rescue Pup and my adorable son, Ochi. This big old puppy can carry objects, help attack enemies, serve as a flotation device across bodies of water, and dig up buried treasures. You can also upgrade his stats to make him even better, such as giving him more attack power, letting him carry heavier objects, giving him the stun the purples have when charging, and letting him swim faster. That may sound like Ochi would kinda invalidate some of the Pikmin types, but it takes a while before you can get him to broken status. Plus, even with the upgrades, he can't do everything, so you will need to use the Pikmin to carry out most of the tasks. Not to mention, look at him! I couldn't badmouth him with a gun to my head. I just want to cuddle with him all day. So our main objective this time is to rescue Olimar, the rescue corps members that got stranded after the crash, and any additional castaways that ended up here after receiving Olimar's SOS. You know, this is a pretty dangerous planet to be stranded on without any help. I better save them all as quickly as I can. How many days do I have to do so? Wait, what? I have as much time as I want to save them? There's no urgency whatsoever despite being on a rescue mission on a hostile alien planet?
Oh, come on!
What is it with every Pikmin game past the first one and their blatant refusal to instill any sense of tension outside of very specific instances? First it was Pikmin 2 with its complete lack of a time limit, then it was Pikmin 3's attempt at providing tension with the juice system, only for it to be too generous with it, then it was Hey Pikmin being a completely different type of game, so that time was forgivable at least to me, and now we've looped back around to Pikmin 4 having no time limit whatsoever. I said it in ERAWW Pikmin 2, and I'll say it again here. If you could spend as many days as you want searching for castaways, why bother with the day system? There's no point to the days counting down if you have an endless amount of them to waste. And to anyone who says, well, you still have a limited amount of time each day to do what you need to do, so there's still some urgency, that's not a valid retort. It doesn't matter that you can only do so much in a single day, because whatever you don't do that day, you can always do the next day with no repercussions at all. There's no point to having a limited amount of time each day if you have unlimited days to spend. It's basically the same as having unlimited time per day, just with extra steps. But that's just one of our main objectives. Our other main objective is to collect treasures laced with sparklium to use as fuel for our ship. Just like in Hey Pikmin, which means that game is canon. Suck on that, Hey Pikmin haters! You know those people are just gonna pretend sparklium was introduced in Pikmin 4, right? Damn it! Well, you will acknowledge the 3DS game eventually. Anyways, the creativity with these treasures just keeps coming back for these games. You can find returning treasures, namely the fruit from Pikmin 3, and brand new treasures which can range from entirely new items to references to Nintendo's old and current history. Plus, the names for these treasures get better and better, like naming an eclair a sweet torrent, naming a padlock a secured satchel, naming a GameCube controller a winged freedom sculpture, and my personal favorite, naming a toy skateboard a personal injury plank. And I thought the work-life imbalancer was getting a little too real. Alright, enough stalling. Time to experience the caves. I'm really hoping they were fixed. Let's go. Oh no. Oh no. They're basically the same as in Pikmin 2. They didn't learn a damn thing. Okay, that's a little harsh. To be fair, they did attempt to fix some things about the caves. However, only a select few are actual improvements, while the rest are little more than band-aids on a shark bite. Even though I had heard that the caves were improved from this, I feel like enough of the problems I had with the caves in Pikmin 2 still persist in Pikmin 4, to the point where they're not really better, just less bad. As always, I do want to give credit where credit is due, even with the media I hate. So I'll go over the few things that are good about them before I tear into them once again. So off the bat, one improvement is that every cave has definitive level design. The rooms, enemies, and treasures are no longer randomly generated. They stay in the same spots no matter what, which is good. Another improvement is that they dial back the falling rocks and enemies to an extreme degree. There are still a handful of caves that do have falling rocks and enemies, but they're both few and far between, and in very specific instances. Plus, the enemies that do fall from the sky are either dwarf bulborbs or dweebles, so you don't have to worry about getting murked by a bulbear or anything. Unfortunately, that's where all my positives end for the caves. Now on to the things they either didn't bother to fix, or didn't try hard enough to fix. First of all, the caves are still not that visually appealing. Once again, more than half of them are just dank and dirty brown walls. They may not be as ugly as in Pikmin 2 thanks to the improved technology, but I still don't like the look of them that much. As for the other themes, the rusty levels are back, and they're the same as the brown walls, just slightly less ugly. There's like 3 shower room floors in the whole game. The playrooms are back, and they are still cute, but still suffer from having daylight in them when they shouldn't. Garden levels and snow levels are completely gone, and the only brand new theme is the one based on those touch pools you'd see in an aquarium, which is so creative and fun and looks amazing. Why does it only show it twice? The second problem is their attempt at rectifying time freezing in Pikmin 2. Now whenever you enter a cave, time does continue passing, just at 1/6 the amount it does when above ground. They at least acknowledge it in-game this time, but there's still no good reason for it, nor do they try to provide one. And like I said, this isn't a solution. You're still encouraged to take as much time as you want while down here, and any time you might lose while in the cave is little more than a drop in the ocean. What's more, the day can't even end while you're in a cave, further proving why this solution doesn't really solve anything. My final problem with the caves is actually something that's entirely Pikmin 4's fault. Remember how the only praise I gave Pikmin 2's caves was that each cave had a boss at the end that rewards you with an upgrade for Olimar and Louie? Yeah, well, Pikmin 4 only has bosses for specific caves rather than all of them. And even then, none of them give you upgrades since they're reserved for elsewhere that I'll talk about in a bit. They literally broke what didn't need fixing. Great job, guys. Though, speaking of the bosses, I would like to mention a new iteration of the BD Longlegs. What do they do this time? They turn it into a disco ball. It even has air horns and plays funky music. That's actually kind of funny. Going back above ground, I guess I should talk about the areas. With the exception of Hey Pikmin's 8, Pikmin 4 has the most areas in a Pikmin game, that being 6, and they're all completely original. The Sun-Speckled Terrace is your typical garden area, the Blossoming Arcadia takes place under this beautiful cherry blossom tree, the Serene Shores is a beach theme that features a rather creative tide-changing mechanic, which is the one part of this game that actually uses time passes well, the Hero's Hideaway is a literal house that's weirdly well kept since PNF 404 is a post-apocalyptic Earth, the Giant's Hearth is a backyard grill, and the Primordial Thicket is the fall level. Good areas all around, if a little too big at times. So Pikmin 4 makes some rather interesting changes to the usual Pikmin formula. To start off, you only get to use a maximum of 20 Pikmin at the start and need to collect Flarlick, yes that's exactly what you think it is, in order to use any more. You can also only use 3 types of Pikmin at once and in the overworld, which would be a neat way to force you to strategize if there wasn't a button that automatically shows you the 3 types you need. What's more, every Pikmin type has their own onion, and you need to carry it back to the main onion before it can be fused. There's also a rewind time mechanic that's exactly what it says it is, and littered around caves and the overworld are piles of raw material that can be used to purchase upgrades and or build structures that make traversal easier. At first, I was a little hesitant about these changes, but I've grown to appreciate them over the course of my playthrough. They can make the early game a bit more challenging and harder parts of the game easier. Over the course of the game, you'll come across this weirdly familiar leafy individual with a dog akin to yours, and he'll almost always have a castaway that he'll Pikminify by shoving through the onion. Yeah, they actually expanded upon Olimar becoming a Pikmin in the bad ending of Pikmin 1. Then they'll challenge you to a Dandori battle, which is both the 2-player versus mode and Pikmin's take on a rival fight. The goal is to get as many points as possible by bringing enemies, pellets, and treasures back to your onion, while also sabotaging your opponent as much as possible by either assaulting them with items or just stealing their treasures. These battles can get quite intense, especially when going for a platinum medal, and I had quite a bit of fun tackling these. It's also cool that the multiplayer mode is more than just the multiplayer mode. Also scattered across the areas are already Pikminified castaways dubbed Leaflings. These guys will challenge you to Dandori challenges, which are basically the same as the Dandori battles, just without a second player or CPU to fight against. While some are incredibly difficult to platinum without a guide, I appreciate these challenges for what they are. And after you beat either one of those, you get to take the castaway back to base to find a way to cure them. How do you cure them? With the new Glow Sap. How do you get Glow Sap? By going out at night. That's right, you can now go out into the field at nighttime, which every other Pikmin game prevented you from doing because it was too dangerous. And honestly, they were right. During these night expeditions, you have to protect a special mound called a Luminol from the nocturnal creatures, which are now way more aggressive than during the day. If the Luminol is still standing, either by the time the sun rises or you kill every enemy, you get Glow Sap. There are even certain night expeditions that make you protect 2 of these things, forcing you to separate from Ochi for effective protection. I love these, as they're intense as all hell with how many creatures are attacking at once, and that freaky music that gets more and more anxiety-inducing as the creatures close in. While on the subject of the night expeditions, this is where you're introduced to the other new type of Pikmin, the glow Pikmin, which I get the feeling are the souls of all the Pikmin I've accidentally killed while playing these games. These guys are immune to literally every element, need a Mario Galaxy crystals to reproduce, and turn into a DBZ Spirit Bomb when charging. Plus, for every 5 of them that spawn during the night, you get a glow seed that spawns 1 of them if you need it, but they're only usable at night and in the caves. Another great addition to the Pikmin roster. One last thing about the night expeditions. During the last few of them, one very special enemy makes his ceremonious return. And I think a few of you are about to get PTSD from it. The Smoky Prog is back from Pikmin 1. I actually didn't talk about this thing previously because I missed my chance to encounter it, but now that I have, I gotta say, this monster is terrifying. Its upgraded look along with how dangerous it is makes it a real terror to take down. And you better hope you have enough Pikmin by your side because you're almost guaranteed to lose at least a few to it. Instead of doing the same menus from the previous games, Pikmin 4 opts for a hub world this time. Time doesn't pass here, so you can take your time talking to your fellow rescue officers and castaways, grow some extra Pikmin, and take on side quests. Even the Piklopedia is available here with notes from these new guys that are fine, but you do unlock Olimar's notes later. I was initially skeptical of this hub world since it was so empty, but once it got filled up with more castaways, I really began to appreciate it more. Oh hey, there's a cave surrounded by water. Guess I can only take blues in. Wait a minute. Engulfed Castle? I know those rollers. No way, no f***ing way. Oh man, the water wraith is back? Oh no, how since it was killed in Pikmin 2, but okay, I know the drill. I better hustle as fast as I can down these very familiar looking hallways laid out in a very familiar fashion, accompanied by a very familiar Mew. Hey, wait a minute! They just took the submerged castle from Pikmin 2 and plopped it into Pikmin 4! Everything about this cave is literally the exact same as the submerged castle, just with a remixed chase theme. Oh no, it's not the submerged castle, this is the engulfed castle. That's totally different. Those are synonyms. Don't get me wrong, it does still have some tension from before, but if you're gonna bring back something as iconic as the water wraith, I do expect something a bit more creative than just doing the submerged castle again, just with a different name and music. No? Well, hey! Come on. Let me guess, it's Olimar.
2 hours later.
Called it! Yeah, you can't tell me that anyone at least somewhat familiar with Pikmin went into this not knowing that this was Olimar. I mean, it was obvious from the trailers and even more obvious when actually playing the game. In fact, how did the rescue corps not immediately know it was him? They have pictures of Olimar in his voyage log, and they know he had a big green dog with him while he was stranded. Yeah, he's a leafling and covered in red leaves, but unlike the other leaflings, his big nose still stands out and is wearing his signature spacesuit. The rescue corps are pretty stupid for not figuring this one out sooner. Anyways, after you save and cure him, you unlock Olimar's Tale. It's a new mode that recreates the events of Pikmin 1, just with the amount of days sliced in half. This is a fun taste of classic Pikmin action, even if it does mess with the continuity, which we'll touch on more later. And once you complete that, you unlock the Trial of the Sage Leaf. A 10-story cave that is absolutely brutal, and not in a good way either. All of these floors push your Dandori's skills to the absolute limit, and attempting any of the floors without all your upgrades will result in failure. And even then, I had to resort to having a guide on standby just to beat these floors, let alone getting a good medal on them. Yeah, the rewards of the white and purple onions are cool, but if all your upgrades and a guide are necessary just to beat this cave, it stops being the fun kind of challenging and becomes the frustrating kind of challenging. Okay, I think it's time to get my second biggest problem with Pikmin 4 out of the way right now. Pikmin 4 is too damn long. Here's how the game is structured. You go through the tutorial in 4 areas of the game, saving everyone you can and Olimar. Standard stuff for a Pikmin game. In fact, I anticipated the ending after the hero's hideaway, so I went back and completed the other 3 areas before saving Olimar.
But wait! There's more!
Turns out, during our rescue mission, Ochi, my beloved son who will not receive any slander from anyone, was infected by the Pikmin and can't leave the planet. So we go back to try to find a castaway named Nell, who's a veterinarian, but wait! It also turns out that the president of Hakase Freight sent Louie to find Olimar, and in typical Louie fashion, he captured Nell and her comrades York and Don Bergman for no apparent reason and won't let them go until you beat the shit out of him. And all of that is just on a casual run. For completionists, you gotta fill out the Picklepedia, collect every onion, Flarlick, and treasure, unlock every upgrade for your character and skill for Ochi, save every castaway, cure every leafling, get a platinum medal in every Dandori battle and challenge, and complete every single side mission, with the exception of the bloom a bunch of Pikmin flowers and grow the Pikmin population missions, because those two continue to loot no matter how many times you complete them. If you're a speedrunner who knows Pikmin inside and out, this process will take you around 20 hours. If you're a casual completionist, it'll take around twice that. And for me, it took 50 hours! Yeah, there were times when I let the game running, but even if you want to shave off an hour and a half, that's still way too much time for a Pikmin game. I know someone's gonna argue that Pikmin 4 isn't that long if you're just doing a casual playthrough, but I have 3 things to say about that. 1, you guys know my rules for the ERAWW series, and for those of you who don't, first of all, welcome. Second of all, I 100% complete every single game I cover in ERAWW form. That's what the everything in the title stands for. 2, if there's one thing I've learned from completing this series, it's that Pikmin is designed to be completed. The best endings are often hidden behind completing the whole game, so you'll be missing out if you don't go for everything. 3, even if you do a casual run, the story is still way too long. The Louie debacle tacks on an extra 10 to 15 hours on its own, and it reeks of padding and made me extremely burnt out by the end of it. I know that's how you access the final boss and all, but you really couldn't have had Olimar run off to the final boss after the 4th Dandori battle. That would have been way simpler. And if you really want to include Louie because he's such a fan favorite, then at the very least scrap the Giant's Hearth. Nothing noteworthy happens there other than saving Don Bergman and York, who are nothing characters that do and add nothing. This is why we seriously need to stop judging a game's price tag by the amount of content it has, because too much content is a bad thing. Did we really learn nothing from Crash Bandicoot 4? And while on the subject of York, Nell, and Don Bergman, I'm sure you noticed by now that these 3 are meant to be callbacks to Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, the protagonists of Pikmin 3. However, it's to such a shameless degree that not only do they make me miss Alf, Brittany, and Charlie, but it also makes these 3 completely hollow. I mean, they're from Kopai, and their body types and color schemes are exactly the same. Plus, like I said, York and Don Bergman have nothing to them, and Nell doesn't fare much better. Outside of her being a veterinarian, the only special thing about her is she wants Louie safe since he kind of took care of her. Okay, like, if you're gonna slap the skins of Alf, Brittany, and Charlie onto completely hollow characters, just bring back Alf, Brittany, and Charlie at that point. Yeah, they need a vet and Brittany is a botanist, but judging from his notes in the Picklepedia, Alf might have some insight, who knows? Moving away from that, it's time to discuss the final cave of the game, the Cavern for a King. It's a 20-story gauntlet filled with every major boss-type enemy you fought, from Bulborbs to a Sovereign Bulblax. There's even a Smoky Prog down here. This is the kind of challenge I like from a final cave. It's not too hard if you know what to do, but still tests you enough to take it seriously. It's also generous enough to give you some nectar and red spray when you need it. Solid final cave with nothing bad. And at the end, Louie decides he's done with your shit and attacks you with the final boss, the Ancient Sirehound.
That's a messed up looking dog.
This final boss has 5 phases, and you need to be on your A game for all of them. In Phase 1, it behaves like Ochi in its attacks. In Phase 2, it uses ice attacks. In Phase 3, it becomes electrified. In Phase 4, it uses fire. And in Phase 5, it straight up flies and acts like a smoky frog. To beat it, you gotta wait until its tail drops, throw some Pikmin onto it, causing it to chase its tail and make it fall over, go to town on it while you can, rinse and repeat. Hope you got a lot of red spray on hand, cause you're gonna need it. What's more, the music for this fight is the most unique track in the whole Pikmin series. Instead of using traditional orchestral scores for the final boss, they used heavy metal. I thought it was playing Pikmin 4, not a WWE match. The last thing I want to talk about is my biggest problem with Pikmin 4 as a whole. This is something I was grappling with throughout my whole playthrough and never received an explanation for. And that is, where the hell does this take place in the timeline? Ever since the trailers, people have been speculating whether Pikmin 4 will follow up on the bad ending of Pikmin 1 or continue on from Pikmin 3. And the weirdest thing is, it kinda does both? On the one hand, we have Olimar's tail being a recreation of the events of Pikmin 1, and in it, Olimar has the SS Dolphin despite not only losing it in Pikmin 2, but also getting a new one in Hey Pikmin, and also acts like he's never seen Pikmin before, in both the tail and in the opening monologue. Furthermore, the voyage log details Olimar having a dream about Hokate Freight getting into a massive debt, implying that Pikmin 2 didn't happen yet. On the opposite hand, we have several logs in the Piccolopedia referencing the sales pitches from Pikmin 2, and Olimar's other adventures on PNF 404. And the recreated events of Pikmin 1 take place in Pikmin 4's areas, rather than Pikmin 1's. Plus, Olimar speaks of Louie as if they've had a history working together, and Louie clearly knows who Olimar is despite not remembering his face because he's so lazy. So which is it? Is Pikmin 4 a sequel to 3? Is it after the bad ending of 1? Is it a reboot that starts anew? Then why is it called Pikmin 4? What is the answer, damn it? I had a bit of a wild ride with Pikmin 4. At first, I was very off-put about several of the design decisions in the game. Not just the ones listed from Pikmin 2, but also the ones Pikmin 4 made on its own. Then over time, while I still didn't like the decisions based on Pikmin 2, I did appreciate the new stuff Pikmin 4 had to offer more and more. And then I grew tired of the game after doing so much busy work completing it. It seems to me that a lot of people are enjoying Pikmin 4, and while I'm happy that they are since it means more Pikmin games, I also can't help but feel like a lot of those people are either mega fans of Pikmin 2, or are long-time fans that are still in their honeymoon phase after waiting so long for a new Pikmin game. Okay, a new traditional Pikmin game, but that's besides the point. The point is, do I think Pikmin 4 is good? Absolutely. Do I think it's worth $60? If you're a fan of the series, sure. But it does suffer from the same design as Pikmin 2, where for every good thing there are a few bad things along with it. Thankfully this time the good outweighs the bad far more, but the bad still sticks out like a sore thumb. Maybe I'll give it another playthrough sometime in the future, but after the long completion journey I went on, I think I'm good for a while. And with that, our Pikmin retrospective has come to an end. Playing through these games has been quite an experience, and I see a lot to love and hate about it. Overall, this little series deserves more love than it's gotten, and thanks to almost all the games getting ported to Switch, and Pikmin 4 selling pretty well for its series, I think that's finally happening. I wouldn't call myself a mega fan of the series or anything, but I'll definitely keep my eye out for future games. To end this video, I'll leave you with my ranking of every current Pikmin game. If you've been following these videos since Pikmin 1, you probably already have an idea of how my ranking would go, but for those who haven't, here you go. At the top is Pikmin 3. Hands down, the best Pikmin game. Not perfect, but I had a lot of fun with it all the way until the end. After that is Pikmin 1. A bit rough around the edges and very short, but still manages to provide a fun experience with minimal flaws. Smack in the middle is Pikmin 4. A good game and nice return for the series, but that length coupled with certain choices makes me less enthused to replay it. Up next is Hey Pikmin. It's definitely different and has its own problems, but that just shouldn't deter you from giving it a chance. Plus, I would rather replay this than Pikmin 2. Speaking of which, at the bottom is Pikmin 2. Without a doubt, the worst Pikmin game. I originally said that I enjoyed my time overall, but the more I've thought about it, the more it's devolved from a game I love and hate to a game I just don't like. Please don't make me play it again. There you go. That's my official ranking until Pikmin 5 is made. Will I also make an ERAWW of that if it happens? Probably, but until then, I'll keep making more videos for you all to enjoy. See you next time, everybody!